Can you tell which of these children was not born free? Can you tell which of these children was not born equal? Can you tell which of these children does not deserve to be treated with dignity? We can't either. Human right number one. We are all born free and equal. What are human rights? Find out at youthforhumanrights.org. It greeted you at birth. It was there for your first step, your first mistake, your first kiss. It's with you when you win, when you lose, when you pick yourself up again. In every moment, you can feel it. Life. Human right number three. The right to life. What are human rights? Find out at youthforhumanrights.org.
So welcome to the show tonight on a very special day, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a man who did so much for all of humanity to get us all to see that we all bleed, we all need air, we all need love, and we all need basically the same human rights that we're all born with from our Creator, regardless of whether we're Catholic, Buddhist, Muslim, Catholic, doesn't matter. So tonight we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King, and I was a little boy when he was in his prime. I remember him very well, watching him on my television. I was a Cuban boy who had come from Cuba and was very lucky to come to this country. And I too had experienced prejudice. My prejudice was a political prejudice because of inability to have freedom, being taken over by communism in our country. So I was very lucky to have been able to come to this country and experience the freedom of the United States of America. But it wasn't there for everyone. And so tonight we have a very special show. And I want to start out with a quote from Mr. King, from Dr. King. He has so many that I love. And I love the ones where he has a dream. And I want to give you this one. This section of I Have a Dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. So with that in mind, and with this day in celebration, and with all the tumult and chaos that our country has gone through in 2020, tonight's show, we have some special guests, and we're going to bring some humanity to our country. I want to welcome to our show two very special men who are humanitarians and really for fighting for human rights continually. And one you met in our last show, former Harlem Globetrotter, Mr. Robert Hunter. And thanks to Mr. Hunter, we have a very special guest tonight, someone who left an indelible mark in sports, in actually bringing the importance of humanity Dr. John Carlos. But as a fellow Cuban, I want to call him Dr. Juan Carlos in honor of his mother, who was a Cuban woman, and his father, who was a military man who fought for our country in World War I to preserve the freedom of America. So I want to welcome Dr. John Carlos.
Well, Doc, it's my honor to be here. Very honored to have this opportunity to share some time with you guys and talk about the great Dr. King. It's just amazing that the things that this man said to me 53 years ago is so self-evident today.
Something about a very important time in history. And this time was when racial prejudice was at its height. And I was in Mexico with the Globetrotters in 1968. I was with some friends of his, Scotty Arbuckle and Bill Cunningham, Bill Chamberlain. And I often wish I would have ran out on that field in a Globetrotter uniform. But each of us get our chance to stand. And I was ever so proud as the years went along that he stood.
There's an actual picture of that time in 1968. I remember watching that when I was in high school. And we're actually going to go to show a video, Dr. Carlos, of that day, of that time, before we start getting into our interview. So engineer, please play the video of Mr. Carlos, Dr. Carlos on the 200-meter dash. You know, they say in history that men are before their time, and that their ideas are very important, but the problem is that it takes time to seep in. So I wanted to ask you what it was like back then and the courage that it took to do what you did back then. So I want to turn it over to you and to let you just go ahead and let the viewers know why, how, what it felt like.
All right, Doc. Let me start by saying I want to make a slight correction to your statement. I think I was on time. I think everyone else was behind time. I wasn't ahead of my time. It was a long time coming for someone to make the statement that I made. But I made it at that time, and society just was not ready for change. I was born in New York on Lenox Avenue. I was born in Harlem. It was a very multicultural community. When I came in, we had, Puerto Ricans, we had Cubans, we had blacks, we had whites, Irish, Italian. Everyone was in Harlem at that particular time. And then I went to sleep one night, man, and I woke up, and all of a sudden, all of the white folks were packing their station wagons and packing trucks and cars, and they were moving out of Harlem. And I remember going to my father and said, Pop, where they going? Why are they going? And he said to me, he said, son, I don't know where they're going, but I would think that they're leaving because they don't like the fact that the domesticated workers are now their next door neighbors. Well, Daddy, who the domesticated workers? We are, son. From that point, it lit a candle in my mind to make me realize through my eyes that I could see at a very young age that something was wrong, something was broke. And then I began to look around to see who had the mechanism to fix it. I looked for big business to fix it. I looked for the adults to fix it. I looked for the church to fix it. But no one stepped up to really deal with the issue. So I started looking for ways that I could get involved. And I got involved through a little fishbowl TV, and I saw a guy named Robin Hood running around in a fancy uniform, outfit he had on with the feather in his hat. I thought he looked kind of silly, wearing stockings. But then I would look beyond the exterior and looked at the man himself in terms of what he stood for. And he stood for those that couldn't stand for themselves. He stood for those that was being pillaged by the king and being pillaged by the sheriff of Nottingham. I felt when I saw him say the sheriff of Nottingham, when he come through Sherwood Forest, that they would have to pay a tariff. Then I began to think, well, my Nottingham Forest is the train station, not the train station, but the rail system where they brought all the goods and services in, right out in front of the Yankee Stadium. And why did I look at the train? Because I looked at many people in my neighborhood. They didn't have food in their cabinets. The kids didn't have clothes other than the clothes they wore to school every day. There was no hope for them. They didn't know how to go about servicing themselves because we didn't raise our kids back at that time to be no thugs or no gangsters or stick-up men. We just tried to survive the best way we could. And every father had to have some sort of side hustle because he wasn't making no money. He had to do whatever he can do to support his family. But even with that, there was still no food in the cabinets. They didn't have McDonald's or Carl's Jr. or Fat Burger, any of those places where a kid can go get $1 burger. If you didn't get lunch at school, you might not eat until the next time lunch is coming around to school. So I took the initiative with two of my partners to start hitting the freight trains. As I told them, we're going to investigate these freight trains. And I remember one of my buddies said, oh, man, we're going to have fat pockets. No, man, this is not for your pockets. Your family don't have no food, and there's so many others. It's for them. It's for you. And we started hitting the freight trains. Now, that's the way I thought as a youngster that I would be able to help alleviate the ills of society by doing this. I broke the rule of my father's rule in the house about me doing anything that was against the law. But I felt I was compelled to do it because no one else was taking the necessary steps to try and give some sort of equality long before I knew what equality was. But then as I was going through my activities, it was two detectives out of 32nd Precinct, Mr. Lester and Mr. Bryant. And Mr. Lester was about maybe 5'11". Mr. Brown was like 6'6". But they had wind that these freight trains were being broken into, and they would take my buddies down, and they would catch them most times. There between them and the Irish police, them little stubby Irish cops, they could run. And they would always have my buddies up against the wall, and I'd be standing in the crowd. What'd they do? Why are you bothering them? And they look around while they hold on to the wall, talking about, dang, he got away again. But I learned a very valuable lesson. And the lesson was that the police realized they didn't have to run me down physically. They ran me down with their eyes, visually. They knew one day they could just walk up and put their hand on my shoulder and say, come with me. But they knew my father. And they went to my father and told my father, Earl, there's been some break-ins at the freight train, and you need to tell Johnny. And my father stopped him. That's your job. You need to tell him. And I was over there where they have the new Yankee Stadium now. It used to be called McCombs Park. We used to have our little track meets over there. And I was there that particular day, and they came and brought enough police cars to circumvent the whole park to make sure that we couldn't get out of there. And they came in there, and they found me and my partners. And they told my buddies, go sit up against the fence over there. Johnny, you come with us. And they walked me across the track on the turn and stood there. Mr. Bryan said, come on, Mr. Lester, tell him. Mr. Lester looked at me, looked dead in my eyes, and he said to me, it's been some break-ins. We think we know who is doing it. And just as he says, we can't do anything to him until we catch him. He busts his nose up against my nose. We're going to catch him. If he keeps it up, we're definitely going to catch him. In other words, he give me the wake-up call. You better find another occupation. And Mr. Bryan said, come on, Mr. Lester, tell me the other thing. Mr. Lester said, oh, yeah, by the way, you have a talent. Talent? What talent do I have? He said, you're a runner. And I kind of smirked like that. Mr. Bryan smacked me upside my head. Don't you ever disrespect Mr. Lester. I wasn't disrespecting him because when he said I was a runner, everyone in the neighborhood was a runner. Women used to get their purses snatched every day from little kids, and they would run them kids down to get their purse back. So everyone was a runner. And he told me, he said, no, John, you're special. And they gave me a number to the New York Pioneer Club. And I went down to the Pioneer Club that Monday. And when I got involved and saw an organized program where they had people training to actually run, we never knew anything about training to run. We just ran as kids. But when I got involved in it, first thing came to my mind was what's my purpose with this track and field? You know, awards never turn me on. I'm not excited about getting an award or winning a medal. So why am I here? And then it came to me from the powers of the universe. God came to my brain and said, as he's done many times in the past and many times since that time, he said to me, he said, John, this is a springboard for you to still have your fight or your fight to fight for humanity, to make people have a better, more comfortable life. You don't have to break into freight trains. I gave you a talent. If you perfect that talent, you don't have to go out and seek them. They'll come and seek you. And then you can speak on whatever you care to speak on, because they will always have the camera in your face and the microphone up in your mouth. Then I realized, yes, let me go and perfect my game. And the more I perfected my game, through the light it came. Now I'm going all around the world and I'm learning things that made me understand the value of education, where as a youngster, I had no need for education. Why did I have no need? Based on the standard or the quality of life for Black people. We didn't have professional people. I didn't have no bank president live in my neighborhood. I didn't have no board of education director in my neighborhood or principal of a school in my neighborhood. We didn't have anyone that wore a three-piece suit. So therefore, what I need education for is about whoever can hustle out there to make $1 to make ends meet. And I remember one time Mona Lisa came to America, and it was in such an enormous crate. And my little ignorant self, I didn't know that the Mona Lisa was as small as it was. I just thought it was an enormous crate. And I made my first trip abroad to Europe, and we went to Paris. And after I saw that crate, it made me reflect back when I was in school, and my teachers would pull out the geography map with that pointer and call me up every day, Johnny Collins, come up here. And she'd say, point to Germany, point to Africa, point to Asia, go sit down. Next day, she right back on it, but she did this over and over again. And then one day I said to her, I said, let me ask you something, Senator, why do you keep bringing me up here to embarrass me? Because when you don't know something in class, they snickering and laughing. Why you keep bringing me up here to embarrass me? She said to me, she said, John, let me ask you a question. I said, what's that? She said, are you God? My lip dropped. No, I'm not God. She said, I know you're not God because God told me to get you ready for where you're going. Now, when I was in Paris, the first thing I thought about was that portrait, the Mona Lisa. Let me go see this enormous poster of the Mona Lisa. And when I went into the museum, I was shocked, first of all, because the portrait was nowhere near the size that I imagined to be as big as that crate was. And then as I'm leaning up against the wall looking at it, I'm saying to myself, I wonder how many of those kids that was in the class laughing will ever get a chance to get off their block, much more go to Europe and be able to see the Mona Lisa. So now education became a very, very valuable asset to me. Now let me suck like a sponge all the knowledge that I can get. It was like more hands-on training. Why? Because I realized when I spoke for those that was less fortunate, those that couldn't speak for themselves, I had to be articulate enough to speak. I had to be wise enough to speak. I had to be educated enough to speak, to represent them in the fashion that they're supposed to be represent relative to the educational system here in America. I don't think that I can get up and talk like I don't know what I'm talking about and try and respond. So yes, now I'm on the trail and I go to the Olympic Games. I didn't want to go to the Olympic Games. I wanted us collectively to stand back and boycott the Olympic Games, to make a universal statement, such as when I had discussions with my father and I would say, Pop, what would have happened in the war, in the First World War, had the black soldiers participated? My father said, well, son, I don't think that we'd be as big a nation as we were, as we are at this time. I said, well, what if they didn't go to the Second World War or the Korean War? He said, this nation would not be what it was. So hence that time, I'm talking about if we take a boycott from the Olympic Games, maybe America would take note to us and realize that we are a very serious component to American history, to American growth. If we step back, they might miss us. But then at the same time, it was so many young individuals on that team that trained every day, went out in the rain, climbed fences, did everything they had to do to have that right to make the Olympic team. Who was I to tell them, man, forget that, you have to sacrifice? But I did tell them that. I didn't have a right to tell them that, but I felt that what I was saying was far more important than the medals, because I'm telling you, your kid might not make it to the Olympic Games. Your kid might not get that 15 minutes in the sun, but your kids still deserve to have the right to be a free-minded human being, to choose what area he chooses to live in or what school he chooses to go to or whoever he chooses to marry. I said, these things are important to me and they should be important to you. But they didn't understand that because they received that glow when they were little kids, knee-high to a grasshopper. Go to the Olympic Games, win that gold, bring that glory back to America. Well, all the kids want to do that. So then when they took a vote, they decided that we were going to go to the games. I was disenchanted with the vote. I'm going to stay home. I'm not going. But I said the powers to be communicate with me. Well, they shot something in my brain then. And what they said to me at that time was, John, you can stay home. But someone from America is going to get in your place. When they get on that 50 stand, you think they're going to represent you the way you need to be represented. Then it was on. Okay, I had to change your mind now. I broke the world record. But based on my political views and my social views, they chose to strip me of my record. They chose to do various things to try and prevent me from not making the Olympic team. They knew I was injured. They took me and put me in lane 1, which is the most difficult lane for anybody to run, much more somebody hurt. They took Mr. Smith, and they know he don't run out in lane 8 because he's not a rapid type runner. He needs to key off somebody. They took him and put him out lane 8 to try and knock both of us out of making the team. But yet and still, the powers to be in the universe was in our corner. We was in his corner. He had us in his hands, and we went anyway. Now, let me flip back in time about when I was 7 or 8 years old, right there on Lenox Avenue, 626 Lenox Avenue. I got up one morning, and I had a vision, a real live vision, a movie screen with me in this movie as a little kid, 7 or 8 years old, standing in a grass field on a box. And I can tell you it was not a Coca-Cola box, but a milk crate, wooden. I'm standing on this field and no one is standing on that box but me. And I could hear all the people in the stadium or in that forum because I couldn't see the people, but I could hear them. And I always use the metaphor now that they were yippee-ki-yay with excitement. As a little kid, it took a minute for me to realize they must be happy about something I did because I'm the only one out there. So as you a little kid, when you go to wave, you don't just want to wave. You want to get up on your toes because you want everybody to see you. Well, just when I went to wave, my hand froze at the time. If you was to see the portrait of 1968, just where my hand is in that portrait, that's where my hand was as a kid. The same thing. You see Mr. Smith's hands are wrecked, and you see the way mine is. Well, mine never got there because of the same thing happened in that vision. You know what it was? Everybody said, man, well, what happened? Why'd you? And I told him, I said, man, someone hit the switch. Someone snapped the finger. Someone pushed the button. And all the happiness and all the yippee-ki-yay turned to anger, turned to venom, turned to hatred. Imagine them pressing that hatred on the individual, as I said, 7, 8 years old. It traumatized me so bad until we went to dinner that night, 6:30, 5:30, 6 o'clock. We got to dinner with me, my father, my mother, my 2 brothers. And we there, my father, you see, I was distraught. He said, Johnny, what's the matter? I said, Daddy, I was in a movie. You were in a movie? He said, what happened? I told him, said, everybody was happy about something I did. And then they started throwing things and calling me names, spitting at me, tell me where to go. And my father, I'll never forget, he brought me into his rib cage. He said, son, no one is going to bother me. My job is to love you, feed you, house you, see if you get a good education. Nobody's going to bother you. And he looked over my head. He told my mother to survive. And it looked like God had something special for this kid. We're going to have to wait and see. I don't know what was 15 years to the day, but 15 years later, I was on that vision stand, and the exact same thing that happened to that vision happened 15 years earlier on that box in that stadium. So it made me think that I was a special blade of grass like Dr. King, Malcolm X, Nat Turner, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King. You understand? There's only certain blades of grass that's going to come through. Like we sit back and you say, I realized that Dr. King, when I looked at him, and I can say, well, let me look at Dr. King and let me look at John Wayne and say, wow, both of them are well recognized. If you mention John Wayne, you mention Dr. King, people know him. But the difference is this. John Wayne is a man-made icon. Dr. King is a God-given icon. So the minute Dr. King died, he soared in notoriety. The minute John Wayne died, most people don't even know who he is anymore. They don't even know he existed anymore. If you look at Harriet Tubman and look at Harriet Tubman versus Grace Kelly or what's the girl's name, Liz Taylor, and you say, well, with the greatness that they were in terms of being man-made icons, and you look at Rosa Parks, a God-given icon. Look at Harriet Tubman, a God-given icon. You don't hear them talk about Liz Taylor. You don't hear them talk about Grace Kelly, but you hear them talk about Rosa Parks on a regular basis. You hear them talk about Harriet Tubman on a regular basis. These are the blades of grass. Even in the sense that you look at the individual that was on the other side of the curve, and you look at John Brown that ran with Frederick Douglass. And you say, wow, we don't hear a whole bunch about John Brown, merely because John Brown had the same vein of Peter Norman had the same vein as John Brown. They tried to erase Peter Norman out of the demonstration in Mexico City. Why? Because these individuals was concerned about humanity. They wasn't concerned about color of your skin, how much money you had, how much money you didn't have. They was concerned about equality. So this is
right. I was gonna ask you something, because when I was reviewing everything you've done, I was trying to, number one, to see what kind of video to include, because there's so many things. And one of the things that I saw coming through and everything that I watched about you, even with what you went through as a young man, all your videos have this kindness, this human care that's actually blind to any kind of creed, color, or religion. And really has a, if I was going to say who was an altruistic guy, and I didn't really know you that well until I prepared for this show with you, you would be the definition of altruistic human being. I was going to ask you something, because I was looking something over and it looked like you were trying to start a humanitarian foundation, a human rights foundation back at that time in '68. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, back in '68 when I was trying to attempt to do this, remember I was classified as the bad guy. So they're not going to do anything to lend support to what you're trying to do in terms of humanity. And at the same time, when you sit back and think of those that might have been on my side of the street, that might have advanced their lives based on what we've done, you thought they would have had it within their hearts and their souls to say, let me lend support. But a lot of people didn't think to lend support. And it took me roughly 2 years after that particular demonstration, and literally 2 years for me to figure out in my mind why were people that I was fighting for walking away from me. Why were they getting away from me? Did I have caca on my collar? Was my breath smelling bad? Was I the devil? Why were they walking away? And at the end of the 2 years, it became evident to me that they didn't walk away because they didn't have respect or love or admiration for me. They walked away for fear of reprisal. But for what they saw happen to me, they didn't want it to happen to them and theirs. So they say the best thing we can do is scat. But in the meantime, prior to that, you know, when you up on the top of the pine tree, the largest pine tree you can find, and you say, I'm on top of the world and I'm going to make a statement for the world to see. But I realized when I step on this branch to do it, that the branch is going to break. But I'm not concerned about the branch breaking because there's so many people under me that understand and they're going to catch me. But instead, when the branch broke, they retracted. And when it came down, man, you just hit the ground so hard, you just bounced. Like I bounced for 40 years, okay? But I never gave up my vision. I never gave up my passion. I never gave up my concern for humanity. And that's what I would tell anyone, that you have to steadfast for what you believe in, despite the storms that you will have to endure. You know, it's about educating someone, and a lot of times you can educate an individual by not even opening your mouth, such as that demonstration, but based on visuality. The fact that they say, my old man told me when I was a kid, he said, you know something, son? He said, you can go stand in the corner and sell an apple and do very well. And I said, well, Daddy, you ain't selling nothing but an apple. He said, but everybody's going to come after the first month to buy an apple from you every day. Why? Not because the apples are good, but because they can rely on you to be there to sell them that apple. So he said, it's about being consistent whatever you do. Carry that, and we wove that into my movement in life.
Absolutely. You know, there's a video that I want to show the viewers. And engineer, first thing I wanted to say is there's a little bit of an echo that I would like you to remove if you can.
Like a scratch or something.
Yeah, so if you can remove that, engineer, that'd be great. And in the meantime, while we're removing that echo, what I'd like to do is I'd like to play the video of Dr. Carlos getting the Arthur Ashe Award. So we're going to go a little out of sequence. So I'd like to play the Arthur Ashe Award, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the recipients of the Arthur Ashe Award for Courage, John Carlos and Tommy Smith.
To receive this honor today is the highest honor that any athlete can achieve. To say I've gone beyond the realms of athletics and moved into the realms of society. So I'm honored once again to receive this award. And I'd like to acknowledge my wife, Ms. Charlene Carlos, and more important, to my mom that's away, and to my brothers and sisters that's not here. But they're with me in spirit. And also, I'd like to bring up Mr. Smith back up to the podium. Could you step back here? I'd like to bring Mr. Smith back to the podium for the simple reason that so many people have tried and split Mr. Smith and I up. He said, she said, they said. And that's the way competitors are. We challenge one another. We all want to be on the top of the hill at the same time. But yet and still, through our competitiveness and the little snipes that you might read about in the paper or see on TV, none of those snipes will ever, ever erase the history that Mr. Smith and I have. If anyone ever thought that we were separated, we're here live to let the world know that we are one, and we will continue to be one. God bless you, and thank you for letting me be one of your heroes tonight.
When I watched that, what came through to me is a very great leader of people who actually has tremendous love for people. It's come through. I was talking to someone about you, and she was telling me, you know, that just, it comes out of you. And I'm curious because, you know, being Cuban, you had a Cuban mother, I'm Cuban myself, and your father being a very strong man fighting for the country. How do you feel your parents impacted you in your upbringing?
But Doc, I'm the embodiment of my parents. My whole foundation is based on my mom and my dad. I mean, everything that I have, my demeanor, my concern about humanity, all of it comes from my mom and dad. You know, my father always told me, he said, no matter what you have, you always have enough to share and help someone else. If you have knowledge and you keep the knowledge to yourself, you're doing a disservice, not merely to society, but you're even doing a greater disservice to yourself. So with the values and the morals, respect and honor that my father and mother were woven into me as a child, I think I grew with it, I homed on it, I developed it. And as I stated to you before, that I believe that you can do a tremendous thing by showing rather than telling. People look at the things that I do, and I led the show out telling you about the greatest asset that I have is that endurance, that never say die, never say quit. And I think that's the thing that people notice about me more than anything. They said, this guy's been through the ringer, but he seemed like he hasn't lost his lust for life. He hasn't lost his desire for change, for the betterment. He wasn't intimidated, or he didn't have fear for what they was telling him was going to happen to him or do it. And you know, in saying that, I'm looking at the fella over my shoulder here, Dr. King. And I got a lot from him. I ran with Malcolm X, learning from Malcolm X for like 6 months, 8 months, somewhere around there. And I was with Dr. King one evening, and I learned so much from him in that one evening. And let me just share a little bit with you what I learned. We was in a meeting, and Dr. King was going to come out and support the Olympic boycott. Why was he going to support the boycott? I began to learn through this meeting. And after the meeting was over, he had said a couple of things. And the first thing that he said was they sent a letter to him. In this letter, they said they had a bullet with his name on it, and he wouldn't have to wait long. Well, when he said that, it was difficult for me to hear anything else he was saying, because in my mind, I'm trying to figure out, if they tell you they're going to kill you, why would you go? But I went on to the rest of the meeting. So when the meeting was over, and the whole meeting, I might say, was geared towards him coming out to say that he would like to come out and lend his support to the potential boycott. He didn't want to take the initiative to be the leader of it. He thought that Harry Edwards, Professor Edwards, was doing a fantastic job. He just wanted to be second in command to lend support. So when the meeting was over, I said to him, he said to me, he said, well, do you have any questions? And I said, yes, sir, I have 2 questions. He says, what's that? I said, well, Dr. King, let me ask you, had you ever played any sports? And he says to me, he said, I can't shoot pool. And I thought that was very interesting because I never thought whether that was a game that you played or whether it was a sport. But when he said that, it made me trip on it. I'm still tripping on it 50 some odd years later. But he said to me, he said, I can't shoot pool. And I said to him, I said, well, Dr. King, why would you get involved in the Olympic boycott? And he said to me, he said, that's a very good question. He said, imagine you being in a big lake and you get to row out to the center of the lake and you lay the oars down and you pick a rock up and sit in your lap and you just sit there until everything is still and serene. He said, then you take that rock and you throw that rock overboard. He said, what happens? I said, it creates vibrations. He said, absolutely, it creates waves. He said, that rock is the Olympic boycott. He said, when it hit the water and went in that water, everything in that lake knew something was amiss. He said, everything on the shores of that lake knew something was amiss. He said, you had the attention of the world and you didn't have to maim, shoot, kill anyone to get their attention to make them realize that there's a problem. It's a peaceful deal with what y'all are trying to do. I'm about peace, nonviolence. I said, wow, man, that was like a gold nugget he gave me for my basket. I was so excited about that response that he gave me until I forgot I had a second question. He said to me, he said, John, he said, you had 2 questions. I said, oh, yes, Dr. King, I'm just trying to get by what you said the first time. I said to him, I said, the second question is, you made a statement about, they sent a letter to you and it said in the letter they have a bullet with your name on it and you wouldn't have to wait long. And Bobby, remember when I was a kid, I used to wear horn rim glasses, black horn rim glasses, somewhat like these, with the black horn rim glasses. And I remember when I looked in Dr. King's eyes and asked him, if they threatened to kill you, why would you go back to Memphis? Remember, he had gone to Memphis already, and he was getting ready to go back. And I remember pulling them glasses down on my nose to look in his eyes. I don't want nothing between my eyes and his. I'm looking dead in his eyes. And you can pretty much surmise what I'm looking in his eyes for. I'm looking for fear. I didn't see one bit of fear in the man's eyes. He was solid as a rock. I could see love for humanity in his eyes. I said, but Dr. King, they're talking about taking your life. And he looked at me and he told me, he said, John, I've done many things in the flesh. And I'm revered around the world for what I've done in the flesh. He said, that's nothing for where I would be in society in the spirit. He said, I will be far greater than I ever was in the flesh. And then he went to tell me, he said, I have to go there and speak for people that couldn't speak for themselves. Now, I never had no caption on what I did in my life until he made that statement that I was speaking for people that couldn't speak for themselves. He said to me, he said, I have to go down there. He said, some multicultural people that work for the sanitation department. He said, they're underpaid. They don't have health care. They don't have respect. They can't speak for themselves. Someone has to be there in defense of those people. I'll be there. I have no fear because they can't stop my spirit. They might be able to stop my body, but they can never stop my spirit. When I went to Mexico City, that's what I took to Mexico City with me. The knowledge that Malcolm gave me for that 6-8 months that I ran with him, and that half a day that I spent with Dr. King, in terms of me realizing that it ain't about my flesh, it's about my spirit carrying out throughout the world. Just by the powers to be, whoever's in this planet that has control, they gave me the blessing to be 75 years old and be able to see and feel what I feel in terms of how people admire, respect, and appreciate who I am and what I stand. The same as I have respect for these 2 individuals behind me.
Well, you know what? I totally can see. Number one, people are always saying, how do I stay healthy? How come you look so good, Dr. John? And your life and the fact that you lived up to your purpose, what you wanted to do, your humanity, that with all the reasons you've had to be angry, to hate, to be violent, with all of that, you've taken that, and I guess with all these different leaders you've been with, and you've taken it all in, and then you put back out love, which brings me to this foundation that you've started, the Dr. John Carlos Foundation, and we actually have a video that I want the engineer to play. Please, engineer, play the video of Dr. Carlos's gala.
What I had to endure from childhood through my athletic career, through my history in the Olympics, and try and bring it up to current time. As a kid, I started out in New York, ambitious, young, and very noticeable. Kid with wide eyes. I was never the type of kid who would go to my mother and father and say, I need to play the trumpet, like my brother wanted to play the trumpet. My older brother, my oldest brother over here, he wanted to play the sax. I wanted to play the vibes. When I was the youngest, I said, let them have it. I'll get my own when I get a chance to play. Well, they didn't play no more than a couple of months. And he went on, so I said, well, I ain't going with them. I'm going to find something else. And I found that black people in my neighborhood didn't have a fair shake in life. When I say didn't have a fair shake, when I used to go to my partner's house, I began to see a severe difference in what was happening in my household relative to what was happening in my partner's household that I'd gone to school with. You know, back at that time,
I don't know whether you guys can hear me, but it froze up on my end. I hope it's working on your end.
Icebox, they didn't have ice, much more food. Then I began to look in the closets and I saw that they didn't have clothes in the closet. Then I began to look in the pantry. There was no food up in the cabinets where the food was supposed to be. And I'm looking at my house and saying, wow, how blessed I am. But you can be blessed. You have to look over your blessings and think about those that's less fortunate than blessed for whatever reason. Then you begin to try and search your mind in terms of why are you up 2 steps and everyone is down 2 steps below. Then you begin to look at various things. And I began to realize that there's a guy that came along and he said he was a Christian. And he went to the white folks that was in charge and he said to them, he said, listen, as a Christian, I'm telling you what you guys did relative to slavery is wrong and you're going to have to repent or you're going to be punished. And one of them said, well, how do we repent? Someone says, well, I have this program called welfare. We're going to lend them money every month, but they have to play by our rules. So they started establishing what the rules were. Well, the first rule for welfare was to abolish the man in the household. 90% of the people in my neighborhood were black, and they were on welfare. It's very difficult to think that any family that had so much love, because that's what kept the family together, was the love factor. We didn't make no money. Most of us didn't have no jobs. We didn't have no clothes. We hardly had food, but we did have love. And then they came in and said, the captain of the ship can no longer be in the house. You have a man in the household, your substance is cut off. And I remember sitting there one day, the woman knocked on the door, and my boy's mother went to open the door, and she said to the woman at the door, good morning. The woman brushed on by her, never even acknowledged that she said good morning. She went in, she went straight to the living room, she went to the ashtray, and she looking, and I'm looking at what she's looking for. She left there, she went in the bedroom. She started looking under the bed there. She started looking in the closet, and by the time I'm asking my man, what is she doing, then it dawned on me. She's looking for something specific. She looked under the bed for a man's shoes or slippers. She looked in the closet to see if his pants or his suit was there. She even had so much bullseye that she went to the ashtray when she first got in the house looking to see if she see a man's cigar. And I realized how difficult of stress and strain that black families was going through in America.
Amazing.
Yeah, I really enjoyed being there at the gala, and the food was really great. And I got to meet 2 women that ran the homeless shelters, which John supports. So the former Globetrotter said, we don't have to put up a homeless shelter. All we have to do is support John. And that's what we're in the process of doing now. Supporting John and his homeless shelters in which he supports. I'm going to give 3 names to you. And I just want you to give me 2 minutes on it. Eddie Ellis.
Wow. Eddie Ellis?
Yeah.
Eddie Ellis was a strong mentor for me. God bless Eddie. We just lost him a couple of years back now. But Eddie was a mentor. He was one that would chase drugs out of the neighborhood. He would educate young individuals. He was in the United States Army, representing this nation in Vietnam. He came home, but because he was there trying to clean the neighborhood up, then he became a political prisoner. They didn't like the fact that Eddie Ellis was trying to clean up the neighborhood. And sometimes you can't go there and, think that you're going to be able to clean the neighborhood up by being kind and asking, would y'all stop selling that in my neighborhood, which some people he had to do hands-on. They didn't like the fact that he was there trying to stop the drug trade in Harlem. So what they did, they set him up to incarcerate him, and he spent the better part of 25 years behind the bar. But when he came out stronger than he was when he went in. Mentally, he educated himself in there. He got a couple of law degrees while he was incarcerated, but he lost his health while he was in there. So when he came out, he still didn't have the strength to carry on his mission. But he had done so much more that his legacy would live throughout Harlem for as long as Harlem was
there. Malcolm X.
Well, Malcolm X is my mentor, man. I heard Malcolm X when I was a youngster. I must have been about maybe 13 years old. And I heard him come on the radio, and he spoke so strong. He was such a great articulate. He could articulate so well. And he reminded me of my father, things that my father would say. But my father would say it to us in the house, amongst me and my brothers and so forth. But here's a man that was saying it publicly on the radio. Daddy, who is this guy? He said, oh, that's a young minister coming down to take over the mosque on 116th Street. Well, I want to go check him out. My father said, nah, son, I don't think you need to go down there because you go down there and get yourself in trouble. Well, I listened to him on the radio a second time, and the second time I said, well, my father said, Daddy, I got to go down there. I got to go down there and see this guy. And my father looked at me and said, all right, son, go down there, don't get yourself in no trouble. And I never forget when I walked in, they would just finish unfolding they used to have the wood chairs that they would fold up down. They would set them up for all the people in the audience to sit down. And there was 2 elder gentlemen sitting in the front row. Wasn't nobody else up in there just yet. And they started coming in, and I went and I sat up front with them, and I asked them, I said, excuse me, who is Malcolm X? Where's Malcolm X? And they pointed to him. And when I saw Malcolm X, I told them, I said, man, that's not Malcolm X. And they looked at me and said, oh, what are you talking about? That is Malcolm X. Man, that can't be Malcolm X. They said, why wouldn't it be Malcolm X? I said, man, that dude is too much to be Malcolm X. Because the way he was articulating thirst on blackness, I just thought he was like Marcus Garvey's complexion. How could this guy be? But when he went to the podium, I don't think he was at the podium for a minute before I said, man, this is him, this is him. And now I'm in a zone now, listening to everything this man said. The third time I went down there to him, the powers that be put in my brain and say, approach Mr. X and ask him, is it possible I can go with him from one location to his next location, just to walk with him? And he looked at me and he says, why do you want to go with me? I said, because I have questions. I have voids in my mind. I'm trying to find answers for him. And he looked at me and he smiled. I'll never forget them dimples. He had dimples in a big clip in his chin. And he smiled and he said to me, he said, if you can keep up. And if Bobby remember, my 2 brothers, they were pretty tall. And they used to go down to Central Park and never paid the bus to go back home. They would actually walk from Central Park back to 153rd Street and 8th Avenue. And all the time I'm with him, I got to run to keep up with him. So when Malcolm said to me, if you can keep up, no problem. I can keep up. So I ran with Malcolm pretty much every day that I can get with him to ask questions and get the feel, the mood, the whole 9 yards. It was almost like from that vision that I had, it was like a stair step, like whoever the creator is, threw this puzzle up in the air and he didn't do anything but just let it fall in place on the ground. If I picked up 1 foot, he would put a pad underneath the foot for the next step. Everything.
Okay, the last one.
Wait, hold on 1 second, because we're running out of time on the show.
Okay.
But we can continue. I know we're going to need more than one show, but we're in a very important time in this country. And what I wanted to ask you, Dr. Carlos, in maybe a half of a minute, because we're running near the end here of our time, but I want for you to say some words to the country about what you feel they should actually do so that this country can get its head on straight. Go ahead.
Well, I would say right now we are pulling the drapes down from the window and the sun is shining in to the point where we have a reality taking place right now. You know, there's very many people in the country on both sides of the aisle that do not want to believe in reality. When you say, man, there's a double standard in this country, with certain people on a certain side of the street would say, I don't understand what you mean it's a double standard. And other people say, well, there's racism based on what they did with people that march down the street for, you know, humanity, for equality and so forth, and the things that were done to them. And then when you see these other individuals break beyond the barriers that we had set up 6 blocks earlier or 6 months earlier for people of color that was making statements and demonstrating, they let them walk on past that area straight up to the front door, kick the front door and crash through the window. And it made them understand, so now we can no longer say there's not a double standard. We can no longer say that there's, what they say, white privilege. It's evident. Now, relative to Black people or people of color, I can suggest this. We, for the first time in my lifetime, 75 years, where we've all come together and realized what James Brown said years ago, I'm Black and I'm proud. They've all come together and said it. So it created this massive balloon, and this balloon is high in the sky right now for everyone to see on planet Earth. But my thing right now is to figure out how can we keep enough helium in the balloon to have it there for eternity, where people realize that we are a component of this society and we all have to come together and work together to make it even a greater society.
Well, with those words, I thank you for being on the show. Mr. Hunter, I want to thank you for having gotten Dr. Carlos on the show. And we definitely need to have another show. And what I want to say to all the viewers out there is to take a look at Dr. Carlos's life, not from the standpoint of a religion, a creed, or a race, but as a human being, which we all are, and that we take 2021 and we get 21 and we win, but everyone wins. And we live up to what Martin Luther King said, where we are all endowed with that freedom that's in America, and America becomes a symbol for the world. And with that, thank you for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you again next Monday night. Thank you, Dr. Carlos, and thank you, Mr. Robert Z. Hunter.
It's time to tell the truth.
Thank you so much, Doc. Thank you again, Mr. Hunter. And just remember this.
Crazy Johnny.
On the way out, remember this. No child is born a racist. They're being taught to be racist. We have to wipe out those teachers.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Amen.
All right.
Good night.
See you guys next time.
Huevos la mañana.
Huh?
Huevos la mañana.
Hey, I want a copy.
You got one.
It's time. It's time.